This is Team Indecisive's final milestone for Project Colossus. The first thing to go over is the replacement of the conveyor belt system. This originally worked in our first iteration of the project where players would grab boxes and items from the conveyor belt as they fell off, but we soon realized that this was really cumbersome and hard to use for VR throwing. So we decided to replace them outright with this tube system in the scene. Before I go into the video demo of this new mechanic, it's important to note that the conveyor belts were raised off the ground, which by themselves isn't a problem until we saw soldier players attempting to try to squeeze under them to get away from fire from the Colossus, which was wrong to the colliders we had on the conveyor belts and would have kind of broken the game if they were able to get under there. So, onto how the tubes actually work though. The player can grab an item from either side, and as soon as they do that, a script is waiting to spawn a new item in its place in the same spot every time. This consistency really helps throwing become a more useful mechanic in the game. We saw, especially during Imaginary T, players really focusing on just using the head laser, so hopefully this brings throwing into a better spot. The next thing on the agenda is the new rocket fist ability. So originally these fists were actually just fists. They didn't do anything special. It was supposed to be a sort of default ability for the arms, but then we ended up switching it out for an actual interesting full-fledged ability. So now by pulling the trigger, the VR player can charge up the fists and launch them at the soldiers. There's UI for the charge meter and sound effects for the fists as they fly off. Once they fly off, there's a little bit of a lag time before they lerp back to position on the Colossus's hands to shoot again. So there's kind of a built-in return time and charge time, so that can be easily balanced if need be. What you may not have noticed in the last clip was that we redid all of our audio sources. So we realized a little bit late into the project that some of the audio sources didn't have spatialization on, which actually created 2D mono sound, which was really hard to discern direction for the VR player. So we went through, redid all that. So now ranges of audios, as you can see with the soldier's audio bubble, are fixed more to the real life model. And one of the bigger additions to the game is finally a ability picker for the Colossus. So these are two sets of VR canvases that allow you to see what ability you're picking and more information on the ability. In the game, these canvases are used with the laser pointer Steam VR setup. So by using the Steam VR laser pointer script, we enabled the controllers to point at each toggle switch on the menu. When you hover over a button, it scales up, indicating that it can be interacted with. Clicking on it activates the ability instruction canvas to show you more information on the ability, which includes a picture of the controller with a highlighted button to show you what button to use for that ability you've chosen. When you're ready, you can click the Ready Up button, and then if you're still waiting on the soldiers to pick their classes, it shows that as well. Additionally, if the soldiers ready up before the Colossus, it also shows them a prompt to wait for the Colossus to pick their abilities. This seems like a pretty simple change to have these detections, but actually we had to refactor much of the menu code so that instead of just looking for the soldiers to hit ready, it actually took into account both sets of players. Also, what's interesting about this new setup is that behind the scenes, the soldiers and the VR player are actually in separate factory models entirely. So we've realized that the laser pointers and other interactions might actually conflict with each other, so laser pointers might bleed through the soldiers menu. So we actually had to move both players to entirely different areas. Although we didn't have time to implement some of the abilities we came up with and some of the assets associated with them, we were able to put new assets in for the plane shield. So now there is a green shield for when the reflection is off and a red shield when the reflection is on. This should provide a better visual representation when soldiers are fighting a Colossus player using the shield. Couple quick notes before I end the video. First of all, a really annoying bug with the VR IK system is now fixed and out of the way. This was plaguing us since our first Imaginary T and even before that, where if you didn't quite ready up right as the Colossus, your arms would just break and not be usable at all, leaving you completely defenseless. So to fix this, the Colossus body is now enabled a little bit later versus right on the first frame. So now the controllers are able to be detected by Steam VR more effectively, and the arms can now sync up. Secondly, we did leave assets out for time's sake. I did mention this earlier when it came to abilities, but there was a magnet ability we were going to do that we had some rough idea of having like a magnet attached to the hand. We ended up not doing this just because of time's sake and balancing issues. But we have those on the back burner if we ever want to dig that back up again, which leads right into our third point. The project isn't over yet. The team is considering, working on this more, iterating on it. We like our idea. We don't think we should stop at any point soon. So we want to see if we can maybe release this to the public as well, because we had a lot of fun presenting Imaginary T, and we want to do that again and get some more feedback. There's a lot of potential that we see with this type of project, so we hope to continue it on.